Hello, and welcome to the first ever broadcast of MYT, otherwise known as Missed Your Trigger. I'm your host, Steven, otherwise known as Bubba Medic on MTGO and Frontline Medic on Magic the Gathering Arena. So this is our very first ever podcast. We are brand new to the scene. We're going to have some other guests on the show, but for now, it is myself. My name is Steven, and if you couldn't tell from the screen names, I currently work in emergency services as a paramedic and a firefighter. So we do have a love for the community, and that goes into partially what this new podcast is going to be about. MYT kind of came from our personal play group and some of the experiences we've had in the past. And basically our mission is to provide nice casual content by casual players. My play group and myself, we're not competitive. We go to Friday Night Magic every now and again, but mostly it's kitchen table Magic. And every time I go for search of Magic the Gathering content, we don't see a lot of tabletop kitchen table style content. It's all very competitive based, how to be a better player, and things of that nature. Well, here at Mr. Trigger, we really want you to be a better human. We want you to be a better person. We want you to understand that the game is supposed to be fun. It's not something that you should get upset about. And along with other things, we eventually will go into deck building and how to build fun, interactive decks that might not necessarily win, but understanding that purpose and understanding the things behind Magic that's not just win-win-win is kind of what our mission here at MYT is. So, to give a small backstory on my Magic experience, I've been a casual player my entire career. I've only ever actually competed for a couple of events here and there. We go to our LGS or local game store. We go occasionally and play in drafts and things of that nature, but nothing crazy. I started back in middle school, and me and my cousins would sit down and play, and they taught me everything I knew in Magic at the time. And after a while, I got a job, and things, we got older, and I fell away from Magic. Then probably about 3 or 4 years ago, one of my good friends from high school got up with me and wanted to get back into it. So we actually got back into Commander, and Commander got me back into Magic hard. Fell in love with the game again, and it has really been a de-stressor for me. And I say de-stressor very mildly, with a bit of reserve, because for a while when we first got back into it, it was not a de-stressor. It was actually a added stressor. Again, one of the reasons why we want to talk about missing your triggers. It's something that happens in the game, and we need to learn how to handle it better and be more sportsmanlike. So moving right along, we'll go right into the story of how Mr. Trigger came about. Mr. Trigger actually was the name of our play group for a little while, because of a particular night. It was about 8 or 9 people got together. We had a fairly large play group at the time, and we were, playing Commander games, obviously, because it was our primary format at the time. And we were having this big tournament, and I say tournament loosely as well. We're all non-competitive players, but somehow deep-rooted in us, we still want to win, and that was an issue at the time. So we're in this tournament, and we're playing a 5-way at the time. We're playing a 5-man pod, which, as everybody may or may not know, is an extremely long game and gets kind of grindy at some points, even for fast decks. So we had some players who were playing not so strong decks, and players playing very tuned, very broken decks, and it caused a lot of drama. And when I say drama, I mean at the time we were playing those games, it was causing a lot of stress, and we physically saw people getting angry, and at some point we got very, very high up into the amount of triggers that people had and the amount of interactions people were having just in a normal board state, and eventually we all started missing these triggers. So, as soon as somebody would miss it, it would be, hey, you missed your trigger, you can't go back. And this was the point I figured out, it wasn't right for us to feel those ways. Now, of course, everybody has ever been in Magic has heard of saltiness or salt levels, and that was something our playgroup wasn't very good at controlling at the time. We would get extremely ill and we would get upset that somebody did something all over, a game that we enjoyed and a game we wanted to win, but we were letting it interact with the way we actually felt during that time. So Salt levels were rising. Everything was very high strung. We ended up having a good time overall during the night, but there were certain moments where I didn't feel like I was sitting around a group of friends. I felt like I was sitting around a group of enemies, and we were just playing to win. And we were all cutthroat and wanting to get the best we could out of all our decks. We started, after that night, we actually ended up building a bunch of decks to beat each other, and I call it vengeance deck building. And what kind of happened was, for a perfect example, one of our playgroup members was running a not tuned but fairly strong version of Ramos Dragon Engine. If anybody's ever played across from this deck, it's a very powerful deck if built correctly. And at the time, my friend, my person in the playgroup, was playing it very strongly. And I went out in the pure aspect of trying to beat this deck. So I built a deck that had a lot of artifact hate. I built a deck that had a lot of flyers. There were things I was looking for just to beat that Ramos deck. Counter spells to counter his multicolored spells and things of that nature to keep him from hitting the board. There was a lot of things I did in this initial deck that I built. And I found that was not only detrimental to the playgroup, because then I started targeting that person because that deck was actually built for that particular opponent, but it was also detrimental to myself. I found out that it limited my creative ability as a deck builder. It made me a worse player because I was so worried about beating a single individual when I could have focused more on synergies, and I could have focused more on, trying to build a good quality level deck that could sit at a table and beat anybody. I decided to try and go out and beat this individual person. So at the end of the day, this may be a podcast more about myself and maybe how I felt about the time. Most of my playgroup, I could also see some of the things change, and certain cards they played, it seemed like it was going straight towards certain decks. But in my personal opinion and our playgroup experiences, I definitely had a lot of salt, and I was definitely building decks just to beat other decks. And at that point, we figured out, hey, this isn't great. So, and in my opinion, that missing your trigger, the jumping on somebody's back as soon as it happens, kind of spoke to me in a way that said, hey, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not that big a deal. Let that person back up. Say, okay, hey, go ahead and have that. We know it would have happened anyways. We shouldn't be so concentrating on, you just didn't do something right and I'm out to win this game. So we go into the fun aspect of Magic, of Commander, things of that nature. At some point you have to understand that it is just a game. Now, in any game you want to win. But you also have to have appreciation of the game itself. I have found now, after we go through this progression and after we've seen what each other's deck building can do, we found that we kind of enjoy to watch other people's decks go off, so to speak. Now that, if I sit across from that same Ramos deck that still obliterates the table several times a game, I still enjoy to watch it work. And that's because we evolved as a play group. We learned that it wasn't just about winning. We learned that Magic is fun, even when you lose. And that's something I feel like a lot of people struggle with. Later on down the road, we're going to talk about things outside the play group. But that's the biggest part right now, is because Commander has been our most played game amongst our play group. Currently, again, we're able to watch each other play and not be so upset if something happens. We've done better about our unspoken social contracts. We don't target just one person. Our table now looks very spread out. Our games are always very close. And normally they last a pretty long time because we like spreading the love and that we don't have to necessarily win. We're just there for the fun of it. It's nice to win, obviously, but it's not the only thing we're focusing on right at that very second. So, for example, we've started building more budget-style decks that really don't do a whole lot. They don't do a lot. They just have fun. You put 100 cards together that are fairly synergistic, and you watch what happens. Those kind of things show that the playgroup isn't just about cutthroat winning anymore, and it's okay if you miss your triggers. And that's currently where our playgroup stands, and I feel now that we've grown so much, I wanted to share that with the rest of the Magic community, or anybody that would want to listen in the Magic community. So, that's the story behind Mr. Trigger, and we'll go into, that's kind of our first topic, is what other issues arise in a play group, and could it possibly cause them to break up? Going back to that night, that the Mr. Trigger night, we found that single targeted removal against one person, it seemed like it was the best thing to do for the table, but we eventually pushed this person out of the game. And now we're sitting here with a 4-man pod. We have one person sitting on the side who literally can't play because 4 other people ganged up on him. It's not fun. We were happy because he was off the table, because he was one of those people that ruled the board. So we continued to play the game, but that individual was quite upset that he couldn't play. Is that okay? Single target removal on one particular deck or one particular person. Maybe it's okay to let him go off a little bit. Maybe your deck will respond to it eventually. And obviously, we don't want every Commander game to turn into a game of Arch Enemy, which happens often with strong builds of decks. So my question is, should we have not targeted him so much and let him play the game a little bit and not ganged up just because this individual had such a strong build? Maybe gone more the political stance of, hey, help me do this part of the game, or whatever the case may be. That's one thing that I've seen personally, that you just target one person over and over again and they end up not having fun. And if the whole playgroup isn't having fun, no one's really having fun. Another thing I see is, again, going back to the original name, is not allowing people to go back and make changes, or go back and change into things that would have happened anyways. Again, when our playgroup was young, we didn't allow this. One of the big things we had as an original playgroup was that if you missed something and it went around, if you had already passed turn, you couldn't go back. And that's pretty fair. But what was happening is, you'd hit your draw step and there was an upkeep trigger, and we wouldn't let people go back and say, oh, no, that's already done and gone. Let those people go back. Let those people get those triggers. The game progresses the same. It would have happened anyways. We don't have to be so cutthroat in Magic. We can actually sit down and have a good time without being buttholes, without having a better way to say it. So, and then there's things like the infamous land destruction, and this is a hot topic, and I apologize. I've probably already made half of the Magic community upset with me. But land destruction is kind of mean. Land destruction is one of those things that we play against it in certain decks, and there are certain decks just built around land destruction. But if somebody you can point that in different directions. Obviously you can't with Armageddon, but if you go to pick on a player that's the weakest, say, they've gone a couple turns and missed land drops. If you're going to take out their lands, you might as well say they're not able to play the game. And that's where we don't want to be as a playgroup. We don't want to say, hey, Jimmy just, missed his 3rd land drop. Why don't you go ahead and take him off his swamp he's got, because it's the 2nd color in his deck, and we don't want him casting anything throughout the entire game. Those aren't fun nights. And again, this is, we're talking about casual people here. You don't want to be a casual player at a group of super competitive players. And I know that normally doesn't happen, but especially when you venture into your LGS, you have to be aware that those things might very well happen. And on the other flip side of that coin, we also have to understand how to respond to those things. The old adage of flipping tables comes to mind, and you can't flip that table every time. You can be upset, you can be kind of butthurt, if you will, but you have to understand that this is a game that a lot of people are super competitive about. If it's somebody you're playing just for the fun of it at your LGS, and you might not have a committed play group, go about your day, keep your salt levels as low as you can, because you might not have to play that person again. Now, if it's somebody inside your play group, and I know this is something a lot of content creators have actually talked about extensively at large, so I'm not going to dwell on it long, but we talk about that social contract. Talk with your play group. Actually sit down and communicate with them. Magic can change a lot of things in your life, and I think one of the things that changed for our play group was we all communicate much better outside of Magic. It seems like we actually talk to one another and figure out the roots of problems a lot quicker than we did when we first started playing. So that's kind of the first spiel we have here at MYT. We want to make just a short little podcast just to let everybody know we were here and talk about the history and talk about the things we're going to be doing. The plan right now is currently we want to start releasing podcasts on Fridays around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That'll be our set schedule for now. It's current to change, but the idea behind that is, a lot of people do Friday Night Magic at their local game store, and sometimes it's the only way they get to play. So I want to be able to release something and have a quick soundbite for those people who might be having trouble with their LGSs constantly, and give them a little word of advice, give them a little bit of an insight on, hey, this is how you can handle this particular situation. This is how we can talk through this. This is how we can still have fun while playing the game. So, moving right along to the end of the episode, we, as MYT, we are appreciative of anybody who gets to take a listen to this. We really are excited to have people listen and hope that we're touching somebody and helping somebody out on this journey. But as the first 20 people that go and like our social media pages, either on Instagram or Facebook. We're at hashtag MYTcast on Instagram, and we're at Mr. Trigger or at Mr. Trigger on Facebook. We do have a Twitter account, but we're not really working it right this second. So if you'll go on Instagram or Facebook and like our page, just by liking our page, we're going to send you a free MYT decal to the first 20 people that go and like our pages. We're not asking people to share it necessarily right now. If you feel like you want to share it, that's fine. But we don't have a huge amount of content right now, and we understand that. So, again, the first 20 people that we can physically track that like Instagram or Facebook will get a free decal. That'll be the general basis for our initial giveaways. And more giveaways will come later on down the road as we get more and more support. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, short little snippet on episode 1. Hopefully episode 2 we'll have a lot to talk about. Hopefully we'll have people email us. Our email is actually mytcast@gmail.com. Again, that's mytcast, C-A-S-T, at gmail.com. If you want to email us and send us some information, or if you want to tell us about some personal experiences you're having, we'll talk about your situation on the show specifically. We do eventually want to start doing some videos where maybe we get some viewers to do direct challenges with us and watch us miss our triggers and watch us really get wrecked in the game of Magic, because none of us here at MYT are actually especially good at the game. We just really enjoy it. We enjoy building fun decks. We enjoy seeing decks do certain things. And that's okay with us. And if that's okay with you, then you're right at home here at MYT. This is Steven signing off for MYT. I hope everybody has a great night. And don't forget to go like our social media sites, Instagram, hashtag MYTcast, and Facebook at Mr. Trigger. Hope everybody has a great evening. And don't forget to have fun and continue to miss your triggers.